Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you live around the world. In this ever-expanding series of dome creation, or explorations of dome creation, I sometimes have the itch that needs to be scratched. And sometimes those ideas are, in fact, I'm going to say most of them are dead ends. However, I touch on them and include them for my own peace of mind, because I need to exorcise them from my thinking. Meaning I can retire the idea and feel happy that I haven't overlooked something that has potential. I mentioned how I saw in a couple of photos a particular style of dome that only uses a single I'm going to say an inserted bolt or threaded rod. It looked like it had a bolt. It had a bolt-like look because the thread and the head, well, looked like a bolt. And I did make mention that in the particular style of dome that they were using, it would have been a very, very nice, elegant solution. One which I may well look at myself for a different style of dome. However, my style of dome that is open on four sides, which already makes it a little bit different from a normal geodesic dome, because it's open, it doesn't have the additional struts and hubs, etc., to spread and dissipate the forces and to make it stable. So while the hubs are important on any dome, if you're using a hub type system, some domes are more demanding of their hub and connections than are others. So copying an idea across different styles could get you into trouble. The one thing I did like about it, though, was it would have been so simple to build. And that's why I said I might even have a go at it myself. And this is basically what we've got here. But we've touched on it already, so I won't bore you with that. Then I came and had another thought about it, and even though I'm showing two bolts here, they bolt through the hub and into a plate which is well screwed to the strut. And if I just put the X-ray on, you can see what I'm meaning by well screwed. 8 screws. I suggest maybe you can get away with 6, but 8 screws, multiple screws. These are representative of, or represent about a 70 to 80 millimeter long screw, and I would, if I was doing it, make them 50% to 100% longer, so that I've got a little bit of peace of mind, I suppose you could say, that the thread embedment in the fibres of the strut are adequate. A little bit of paranoia in that department probably wouldn't go amiss, because you would not want it loading up and the whole end of this bracket, or a plate, could come off, because your bolts are threaded straight into it. You wouldn't, and the thinking is that if it was loaded up sufficiently, yeah, well, that would be stuck to the hub, but the strut, the timber strut, would pull off. Not good, I would suggest. Then I had another look of it here, where in the previous version the bolt was placed horizontal to the cut of the end of the strut. But this version has it tilted and runs down not horizontal, but parallel to the surface, as showing there. Now this goes back to making it of the style that I like one where we have a tube, or a hole cut in the side of the strut, a tube put through it, and then the threaded rod goes through said tube, and there's a nut inside the tube. So you've got a very sound mechanical fastening, and it's just one single fastener per strut end that goes through the hub. Again, a derivation of the very first one that I showed and talked about. And this was just saying that you've got to be a wee bit careful, because you might find it difficult to get a socket set or socket into there and to tighten it up. Ring spanners, open-ended spanners, yes, you could. So spin the nut up, torque them up with the open-ended spanner. Good idea. A little bit busy though. I liked the previous versions, at least the way I showed it, because of its visual look. Very elegant as far as I'm concerned. Very, very nice. So we'll go there. Now, moving along a little bit, I thought, well, if we wanted to ensure that we could hold this bracket on, and we were a wee bit uncertain about the screws capability, as I said, you could make them longer, and these would, if they were of a specific or high quality design, I cannot see them coming out of the timber, especially these ones, which are the higher demand ones. You could make these long as well, because I was watching a video of my much preferred and touted Specs screw, and they showed this being used in a T intersect. Now, it's not withdrawal like this per se, but it kind of is. And I'm going to draw in the photo. It was just a screen grab from the video. Oops. Let's rotate that round a bit, shall we? And what they're showing here, I'll try and hide everything. I'm just hiding stuff so it's easier to see. What they're showing here, very pale. Don't know why it's like that. It's translucent. Why is that? Oh, X-ray. Anyway, these are, I think, 200 millimeters long. Not overly long, to be fair. I've used screws of that length for that length or longer for a couple of jobs, but this was interesting. They're showing two people standing on this length of timber, that would be a 100 mil square piece of timber, and they've got two screws going in the top, two in the bottom, holding it. Is this not similar to what I'm talking about? I'm not saying it's the same, I'm saying it's similar. Now that means that that's 100 mils of embedment for the top of that screw. I can't recall the gauge of the screw. I could chase that down and find out, but if there was 100 mils of embedment in this piece of timber in a very similar grain situation as what I'm considering, and it were to have a washer type head, which Specs has, then I can't see how this would be a great deal different from this, where we have got the screws going directly into the end grain, yes, but they are the lower loaded screw, in my opinion. But we've got these ones, and that is representative of approximately 140, 150 mil long screw. Let's have a quick look, shall we? In fact, I haven't done this. Let's take all I'm doing is the embedment there to there, 125. Okay, so we've got a representative of a screw that would have the similar embedment as would this photo show. I don't see this having that much force on it, but all this is doing is building up the snippets of information that we could then present to an engineer and say, this is what I have drawn, can you put a figure on it and give me your considered evaluation? Or if I'm building it for myself and I don't have to go to an engineer, I just say, I'm more comfortable having a screw of X diameter, washer head, so that it gives good embedment, holding power. It means that the shear of the screw is solely at the head. It's not going to twist off, as can happen when you are embedding a countersunk screw. How do I know? Done it many times. So this is a higher quality screw for a kickoff, good thread design, and of sufficient length to give some sort of confidence based on this Spax company produced video. Now, they're not the same situation, but you could see at least my rationale for saying that if that was 200, that's 100mm embedment. This is in excess of 100mm embedment. Two of them, in fact 4 of them if you wished, could be used to hold that plate on, and no amount of reasonable load imposed upon it would dislocate at this point or rip the threads out of the timber. Bold statement, that last bit, but it's a dome. We know how it dissipates the energy. However, as I said, the particular design that I'm using or wanting to look at is one where there are fewer struts and or the energies are concentrated into one, let's say 2 joints, one either side of the base triangle. That's, I call the leg. So I'm finding that as a very interesting and elegant approach to it. The only thing is the washer head would probably interfere with the hub a little bit, so there may be a requirement to pop a washer on first, and then that just gives the hub a little bit of a standoff tolerance to avoid binding with the screw heads. Equally, these could have a countersink or a counter bore type recess, which would eliminate that. Sweet. Either or. The counter bore is a little bit more of an issue being in steel, but I'm sure that could be done. Now, with that big bit of wordiness, what about, now this is an alternative where there are no screws required to go into the end grain, none whatsoever. We still have this big fat 10mm washer, yes, that's still there, but a bracket that goes around the timber could be screwed or bolted through the sides, meaning this is fixed to the strut and this plate with the holes in it for the bolts is loose. In fact, you would assemble the strut with the bracket on each end, and these would be in a box waiting to be used, and at the time of assembly they can be slipped into place and the bolts put through them and tightened up. Now, I've actually seen this somewhere in an assembly, and I, for the love of me, cannot think of what or where it was, and that's what twigged me with this. It literally could have a tolerance of 1 mil or so between the bracket and the strut, and as I say, just slipped into place and then tightened up, because once it's tight, nothing's going anywhere and all the pressure is in shear on the screws or nails, in fact, or bolts, in fact. So you could put a small bolt, an 8mm bolt, through the two sides of the bracket and the timber, and I don't think that's going very far. And then you could just put screws to make sure there's no rotation of the bracket under load. Or it could be all screws, whatever, the engineer will tell me. I'm putting a lot on the engineer's shoulders in this one. Or as I said, if I'm building it for myself, I would just put maybe 4 screws along that area there, 3 or 4, and then a couple more down this end as well, to stop any chance of the assembly coming under load and pulling. Now, that's a really good idea. Yay! Except I don't want to do it. And that was the itch that I had that need to be scratched, and scratch I did. And now that I have, I can put it aside. Why don't I want to use it? Well, the whole point of having this block was if it's good looks, whereas this, to me, for me, is not acceptable. It's not pretty enough, or in my choice of words, elegant enough. We're almost doing 2 things to achieve one end, and in the process making it look ugly, in my opinion. But if it's what you want to do, that's probably not a bad way of doing it. It would be dead simple to construct. It could even be that this is a bit of box section with one end cut off. Now that's very doable, meaning that you could cut this off in your bandsaw, metal cutting bandsaw or chop saw, to whatever width you determined necessary. Even cut it a bit longer and then angle it at the top, whatever. In fact, if you start doing that, it's starting to tidy it up again. Sorry for saying, but in my humble opinion, it would look better. But it's not what I wanted. I wanted this. Oops, don't want that. I want this as an option. Just tidying the project up a bit. So that could be, and I've got that set off because I was contemplating a washer being placed in between, because really that's all the pressure you can exert anywhere on the washer, or whether it's hard up against the plate. You're not weakening the assembly. But with those longer screws, it becomes a very elegant, relatively simple assembly to create. And these can be popped in with a little bit of Loctite or some sort of to bind the thread so they don't work their way out, just in case. So the biggest expense would be the screws, not the timber, but the hub design would be much simplified with this process. It has taken, how would you say, second place in my selection ideas, because I can now eliminate holes through the strut, threaded rod, pipes, etc., tabs on top. This achieves a full assembly just there. So the cost of the screws, while not to be ignored, might just pale into it's just another cost, but pale into insignificance compared to the original idea that I'm still preferring, because I can't quantify the ability of these screws to hold, where I can probably quantify the threaded rod and pipe type of assembly. This isn't taking first place at this stage, but the looks, it's actually taken first place as far as the aesthetic requirement is concerned in my situation for my preferences. So scratch has been or itch has been scratched, so it can be eliminated. This has gone from maybe third or fourth place to now being a very close runner for first place. So, and it's been many months getting to that point where I've got a contender. May not win, but it is a contender. So yeah, very easy to get just flat bars of this, flat stock of this, and there's another twist to this, and I will touch on. But this is 10 millimeters thick, so it is fairly hefty piece of steel, and the reason I chose 10 millimeters because that is the thickness of the nuts that I'd use for my 12 millimeter bolts. So of course these could be smaller, could be a 10 or an 8 millimeter thread up here and keep the heavier one down the bottom. Whatever, I don't know. But the twist is, what if this were to combine these two aspects of it? That becomes, in fact, hold right there as I am on my other screen. I will open up and draw into the screen this. This is the, as I was saying, the flat bars that you could use. Any thickness here, it'd probably be 40 mils wide, if not 50. The thickness, well, you've got your choice. If you wanted to lighten it up a little bit, you've got the options of going lighter. 10 mils was just because of the thread embedment being more acceptable in an engineering type sense. But the other one is, what happened if we went to a rectangular hollow? Where do we want to go? No, I was thinking that we might have been able to use a box section, dock it down to accept a little bit of the sidewall going over the end of the strut, so making a mini version of that, but having the wall thickness that it would be sufficient to thread into. It's no sense really trying to combine them if you can't have one do both jobs. Otherwise you might as well just go back to this and not worry about it. That'll be on the back burner for certain. So this is, where is it? Oops. Whoa, where did we go? Rectangle, hollow section, until you get up to the bigger section there. You could cut that in half, so it's 75 long going down the strut wall by 50, but the thickest it goes is 6 mil. So probably no, because we want to keep one of the dimensions roughly the size of our thickness of our strut. Darn it. But worth an idea, a bit of an exploratory, isn't it? So anyway, close contender, or a contender. Rightio, that's it. Wandering off. Get outside and do something before the day disappears on me. Okay, see you in the next one. Bye now.